This is a PSP 1000. Unfortunately, this PSP is dead right now. And yeah, I could use a traditional charger for one of these, but come on, that would be no fun. So I bought one of these. This is a 10 watt, 5 volt USB solar panel. Look at it. It's a solar panel. Okay, so this is what I figured out. Basically, in order to charge your PSP with solar, we 100% need at least 5 volts and 2000 milliamps, which just upon my research with ChatGPT and just making sure everything is 100% with continuity, I need a 10 watt solar panel. Now, the cool thing about this solar panel is there is a USB-C port and a regular USB port. I'm assuming they're outputs. And just to verify this PSP is completely dead, we are going to try to turn it on, and it is really dead. And let's open up the battery. So this battery is an AUS 10. This battery is the Amazon $20-something special. Now, this battery in specific, I have kind of taken apart and modified in quite a few different ways. And the reason for this is because the battery doesn't fit in the PSP. And now I kind of got it stuck here. Hang on. Ah, crap. Now, this is not what the video is about, but the problem with aftermarket batteries is the battery cover does not close. But that's not what we're trying to solve here. We want to charge the PSP 1000, the big Chungus edition, with one of these. Now, before we do anything, let's make sure that this PSP actually turns on. All right, and charging. Okay, that's cool. So let's boot it up. Okay, nice. All right, cool. It's charging. Just want to make sure that it is taking a charge on the battery. Okay, it's taking a charge. Now, this PSP is running custom firmware. You know, you can see that. But the thing is, sometimes on custom firmware, we get weird files that can sometimes show up in our game folder. It's really weird. It's almost like when people are trying to steal our data. See, here's one right now. Let's try to launch it and see what it does. I'm curious. What? This video is sponsored by Aura. So the PSP was never actually meant to run this, but if I can make hardware from 2005 shout out a video sponsor, it's probably worth listening to, because this is about protecting your online privacy. I literally searched Chase Fournier, Michigan, because people know I'm from Michigan. And I literally found my first, middle, and last name and an old address that I lived at. And they got my age wrong. These websites are shady. They're called data brokers, and they sell your personal information, but you can get them to delete it. But they make it as consuming and slow as possible on purpose. That's where Aura comes in. Aura automatically finds and removes your personal data from broker websites. And it's not just that. Aura also gives you real-time alerts if your info hits the dark web, credit and banking fraud alerts as they happen, 24/7 identity monitoring, a secure VPN, antivirus, a password manager, and $5 million in identity theft insurance with 24/7 support in the US. It's frustrating knowing that companies profit off of selling our information. And that's why I'm choosing Aura. I'm not going to leave myself exposed, and you shouldn't either. You can try Aura for 14 days for free using my link in the description, aura.com/chasefournier. Now let's get back to the video. Now imagine you're out camping, like I was over the weekend. And imagine you brought your PSP along, and you got a campsite that doesn't have AC power. And you forgot your inverter to plug one of these in, you know, like the old 120 outlet or 110, whatever it is, you know, for US. And all you got is one of these. But of course, you're not really going to be in that situation, because you can't really do project videos like this because you won't have the tools, and then you'll be sad, and then you'll regret life choices. But that's not where we're here. We just want to charge it and see if we can get it to turn on. So in this little pouch on the back of the solar panel, there is the toilet paper user manual. We have a USB-A to USB-C power cable, and we have these little latch things. We have 2 of them. Pretty cool. All right, so it seems like we have everything we need, except we don't. The PSP, albeit, uses a lithium-ion battery, and I thought maybe we could just create a power cable solution that just goes to the battery and basically just run it completely off of solar. But I don't know. Should we do that? I'm thinking we should. But the problem is this battery runs at 3.6 volts. We need a buck converter, so I don't think that's really a good option. And I suppose I could cut the head off this thing, but the problem is these chargers are OEM. They're not being made anymore. And that means we're getting older, and that means we're marching towards the inevitable death.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
So maybe it's not the best idea. Let me think of a solution, and I'll get back to you. So as I was thinking of solutions to power this PSP, I realized something. The PSP charges at 5 volts. But the problem is we don't have a cord that I'm willing to cut right now. And I'm not really in a position to convert this to USB-C at the moment. I do have ports, they're just not here with me right this moment. And of course, I'm a purist. I want to keep things as, well, let's be honest, maybe I'm not a purist. But I want to try to keep the hardware as original as possible. But the one thing that is not OEM here in this PSP is the battery. So inside this PSP is my battery. So we have a lithium ion cell connecting to this little board here that then ultimately connects to the PSP. The PSP has some sort of serial connection, and I don't know if this board has that on it. I don't know if that is part of the circuit or not. I'm familiar with the PSP, but I'm not super familiar with it. Maybe you could let me know in the comments. At first I was thinking maybe we could just charge this PSP with solar, but then I realized the direction I'm gonna go is powering this PSP completely on solar power. Okay, so my big problem is I don't know if this board, even though the board can take 3.7 volt and probably up to 4, but our solar panel only outputs 5. And I don't really want to put 5 volts into this board and it cause any big major problems, like specifically burning up this board. Yeah, we could put a little buck converter on it, but I don't have one on hand that I can think of where it's at. You know what? I do have one. I'll be right back. My idea was this. A short while ago, I had an Xbox 360 that had no power, and I fixed it in a live stream. And I used a buck converter to restore the 3.3 volt rail. Unfortunately, this Xbox is going to die again because I'm going to remove the buck converter that fixed it. Man, I need to buy more buck converters. RIP Xbox 360. You're going to live in the grave now. All right, let's remove this board and back to the project. Okay, so I suppose the first thing we're going to do is remove this battery, right? Here we are, BMS board. Now, what we need to do is attach this guy. We need the output to be 3.7 volts, which I think we can do. So this is the input and the output's over here, and ground is like, it's the same on all things. So the ground just works between the two, and then you have voltage in and out. Voltage in is over here, voltage out over there. All right, easy enough to understand. Remember how the solar panel came with a USB cord? You know, it's a nice USB cord, except it doesn't have a head on it now. And we need to cut back the neck. Oh, beautiful. Look at that. Perfect. 5 volts and ground. So let's go ahead and chew these back real quick so we can have a better connection.
I didn't know you spoke Spanish.
All right. First thing we're going to do is we're going to input 5 volts with this cable. And in order to do that, we need to tin up these wires. Wires, getting tinned. Melted a little bit there. I'm not really fancying that, but if it works, it works. All right. Now we have our input. Get rid of the ground. Oh, my solder looks awful without flux. But do I care? Only sometimes. All right. What do we got to do? We got to solder this. We're going to add the flux. There's a little bit, and there's a little bit. Solder. Oh, you know what? We could just solder to each side of the capacitor because that's technically the same thing. Hopefully this cap doesn't short. Okay, perfect. Looks delicious. All right, that looks... It's not my finest soldering work, but it'll do. Then we have our output, and we have our ground. Okay, now let's clean up this flux so it doesn't look crappy. Clean up the flux. I almost said alcohol, but that's fine. Whatever. I don't care. All right, buck converter. Now we have to plug it into a USB port. So we have 5 volts. Our output is probably set to 3.3, but let's see. Output 3.2. So we got to raise this up a little bit. Maybe this will adjust it. Oh yeah. Okay. Was that enough? 4.3 volts. It's too high. Lower it down just a tad bit, just like that. Maybe that's enough. We need like 3.7 to 4 volts. That's fine. Oh, it's at 3.7. Perfect. All right. Disconnect it. And if you want to buy one of these boost converters, they sell them on Amazon. They're quite amazing. You can take an input voltage and then create an output voltage. It has 65 volts, but other than that, good to go. And I believe it outputs at 1 amp too, which is really, really convenient. All right. Now we need to connect this to this. Add a bit of flux right there. We're gonna take this nice wire and we're gonna just put it right there. That's gonna be for our ground. And then we're gonna connect the ground right there. And I know this wire looks long and just, it needs to be trimmed, but well, it is what it is, fam. All right, now we gotta take our other wire and we're gonna connect it right here. If it'll connect. There we go. It doesn't look good. It's not my best work, but it works. All right, now just as a test, I have a USB plug right here that has 5 volts coming out of it. I have our atrocious design circuit and I'm going to plug it in. Okay. Is it burning? It feels warm, but it probably could be because of the soldering. All right, let's take our board that has power and plug it in. Now remember, this is just for testing. Now let's see if our PSP turns on. It is not turning on. There's no power here. Let me see if our output voltage is there. Huh, that's weird. So we have an input voltage of 3.8 volts, but on the output, we only have 1.2. Weird. Is this BMS board board dead? I have a hunch. I think I had issues with this BMS board batteries thing in the past, and I think the solution was to plug it into power while it was plugged into. I think that's how we should do it. All right, PSP charger. Plug the power in. Okay, it's plugged in. Now we need the 5 volts and plug in this to the PSP and plug in the power cable. And do we have a light? We have a blinking light. Let's turn it on. Okay, there's power, and we have a PSP that's turning on. Okay, PSP turned on. Now disconnect power. It's working, but for how long? That's the question. It's running. Oh, it's running off of USB power. So this solar power solution should technically work. But now let's pretend, man, I'm trying to think of how we can replicate this. Oh, it just turned off. It just turned off. Okay, let's disconnect USB and then reconnect it and see if it turns on. Nothing. Man, okay. All this for a solar powered PSP. Okay, I'm thinking. Let's go outside. So let's grab the charger and PSP. You know what we should do? I don't know if there's a secure way to mount this right now. I don't have any double-sided tape, but we'll just make it work. Oh, outside world. Okay, PSP charger. Okay, so I have the PSP charger, and there's a power cord out here, a spot where I can plug it in, just to try to simulate getting the battery to start working. So let's plug this in. And will the PSP reach? Yes, it will. Okay, we have the solar panel. We have the charger. Let's plug the PSP into this thing. PSP is now plugged into the solar panel in the sun. Now, let's plug the charger in to get it to turn on. It's turning on. You can't see it in the sun, but it's on. Maybe the volume is all the way up. All right, let's unplug the charger. And it's on, dude. It's freaking on. Listen. You can hear it. It's on. Let's play some games. It worked. The solar powered PSP. It worked. There's a freaking bug on the PSP, but it's on, dude. It's booting the game. It's booting Chinatown Wars. It's working. You can play the PSP in the sun off the sun's power. Because watch, I bet you 100% if I block the solar panel, it'll shut off. And it dies. So can you run a PSP completely off of solar? Yes. Is it technically worth it? Not really, but in an emergency situation where you're like, man, I really need to play, technically it'll work.